I just saw your dog in the background. I was like, hey, buddy. They're not very like interactive, like,
Nah,
you literally walked in, stretched, and laid down. Like,
Yep. Welcome everybody to your show. My name's Eric Alvarez, and I am excited because this week I have my friend, a special guest. I got Steven Sosa. Steven, how are you?
how you doing, guys? I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So Steven Sosa, for those that may not know, is a comedian and one of the founders of Laredo Funny, which is an interesting story because when Steven started doing comedy here in Laredo, there wasn't really much going on. So it's kind of had like a trailblazer kind of thing, right? You kind of had to find some way to make it happen and to convince not just the audience, but convince maybe promoters or local, venue owners that like, hey, this is a thing that people would love to see, right? So we're going to talk about his journey in comedy. That's why we have him on here. Let me just explain the show real quick for anybody who has never listened to a show. If you're tuning in for the first time, your show is all about you. So this week, it's going to be all about Steven Sosa. We're going to talk about his journey in comedy, kind of how he got started, why he got started. We'll talk about, just the different experiences that he's had because of the comedy kind of lifestyle, right? And the idea is that maybe there's something in Steven Sosa's story that can apply to your situation, right? Maybe you're not, even if you're not, wanting to be a comedian, there's still maybe something in your story that like, hey, you know what? I relate to that, or I've gone through that, or I know somebody's gone through that. And the idea is that we like to bring on different guests, right? We've had on professional tennis players, we've had on doctors, we've had on business owners, we've had on pretty much like every aspect because we think there's something in everybody's story that you can find a little takeaway and say, hey, you know what? This definitely helps me out. And if it doesn't help you out, at the very least, we bring you a fun and entertaining story. So Steven Sosa, with that being said, are you ready to get started on your story?
Yes, definitely.
All right. So we talked about comedy. You're a comedian. So I want to know, there has to be like some sort of a starting point, obviously. Was doing stand-up comedy something you always thought of, or was it something that kind of came along as you were maybe growing up in your teens or maybe a little bit after your teens?
I would say it started when I was, in elementary, because I was always trying to be funny in elementary, and then, and I always watched comedy specials, even the ones that my mom wouldn't let me watch, and my dad was cool about that. And I've always in my beginning that I've always loved stand up, and I didn't even know what it was when I was a kid, like that little. Yeah. I just saw guys being funny, and I was like, that's cool, and it was tough because when I was a kid, I had that same bringing up where everyone was like, you're not funny, Steven. And a lot of times that was my beginning years of like not being funny to anybody.
Yeah.
And I guess, my whole humor came from just friends that I met that I thought they were funny. Mm-hmm. And I would mimic a lot of different people until before I even started mimicking comedy. Yeah. That was my first put into like, well, I want to be funny. And I guess that was how I started, like just, and checking out how other people were funny, and that's just regular people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like you and I were probably the same in the sense that like as kids, we loved to go to school not because we loved school, but because there was an audience of like 22 classmates or whatever that we could go ahead and kind of play to, you know what I mean? Like, I want to make my friends laugh. I want to make this random girl that doesn't know me laugh. Like, It was kind of like a performance already in that kind of early stages, right?
And you didn't even know you were doing that.
Yeah. But you were just like, exactly. Oh man, I want to go make my classmates laugh. And that's kind of like the beginning of comedy. And you mentioned that, you've had people tell you kind of like, hey, you're not funny, this and that. I remember personal experience. I remember I was dating this one girl and she told me that, like, you think you're so funny, but like, you're not. And I just looked at her and I was like, yeah, this isn't going to work out. Like we're done here, like we're done. It's just something so simple as that. And I'm like, nah, you know what? I'm good. So you were looking at, a comedy getting started here in Laredo, though. It may have been kind of tough because I don't remember there being much of like a comedy kind of scene or venues to go to
Yeah.
before you got started. Is that correct? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, like, to be honest, it was only a few that were doing comedy. And at the time, I really didn't know them. I just always noticed comedy, like especially like the Laredo Little Theater and like AJ's Bar at the time when they were doing it. And I would always see it, but I was always scared to do it, you know, because like if I'm from the past, all that stuff, I was just like, it was just a frightening thing to like, do I have that kind of charisma to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, to be honest, after a while when I started playing music, because that was my other passion was music, and I remember I started playing in a band, and that was the first time that I started noticing my confidence going up, because I already played music and I was good at it.
Yeah.
So I had that mentality of like, you're a rock star, Steven. You know, like if you can do that, you can definitely tell a dick joke. You know, like
yeah, for sure. Now you played on stage with bands before. Now leading up to your first, do you remember your first comedy show?
I remember the first time I did comedy to try it out.
Okay.
Because it was like the first time I ever did it was, I remember because I wanted to do it in Laredo, but I was too scared to. So I went to San Antonio, and I still remember calling up comedy clubs and asking them how it worked and how do I do it. And, you know, and I remember like, I was like, okay, I'll see what I can do. And I'll try to get in. And I remember my buddy let me stay at his apartment, and I went with him to my first ever open mic. And that was the first, and then like the first time ever doing it in front of 8 people, you know, including the bartender and the Coke girl. And just remembering like that was my first time, and I remember doing like 10 minutes of like, it wasn't comedy. Yeah. Like it was 10 minutes of me just talking, but I remember I still had that charisma of like being up there. And I still remember some guy after I got off going, "Hey man, I think you got something." And I was like, "Oh shit," like that's so cool. And I think that was my first time ever doing it, like ever trying it out.
Now, leading up to that first time though, now you had already been on stage as a musician, correct?
Oh yeah. Yes.
So were you, for that first experience of an open mic, were you feeling kind of confident? Or you're like, oh, I've done this before, I've been on stage before, or were you still nervous of like, I have no idea how this is gonna go? Yeah,
definitely still nervous. I was, even as much as I thought of myself as a rock star. Yeah. Like as soon as I went up there, knowing that I couldn't wow anybody with my guitar. Yeah. And it was just me, like that sunk in real quick. You know, as soon as that first joke went in, and I was just like, you know, doing it. But that was my first one, and I still, like, after that, I kept doing it. I just kept going to every open mic, and most of the time San Antonio was the only place I can go to. Yeah. Because there was nothing in Laredo for that point, you know. And I still remember, and the only thing they had was that one show at AJ's, and that was the only reason why I started doing the open mics, because the guy who ran that show, who's a great friend of mine now, shout out to Mario Superstar, but he was the one that did those shows at AJ's. So I was just, and then I still got to watch people perform, and I still asked him, "Hey, I wouldn't mind trying this out." And he's like, "Sure, I'll give you 5 minutes." And that's the scariest, to hear someone being like, I was just like, oh, like deer in the headlights. Yeah.
How long ago was this, by the way, just so we can put a little time frame for people?
2014.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was in the band by then, and that's when I noticed that there were shows at AJ's. And like I said, once the guy told me, "Hey, like, you know, you want to do 5 to 10 minutes?" I was like, "Oh, I don't think I have it." But that's when I went to San Antonio, did my open mics, and from there I was like, "All right, I got it." And then when I asked him, he was like, "All right, you're doing 10 minutes this day." And I was like, you know, like,
yeah. So you mentioned though, the first open mic that after, you know, your time on stage, that somebody said, "Hey, you know what? Like, you got something." Yes. I have a couple of questions about that. Is one, do you remember who that person is or was? And two, how important was that for you to hear somebody say that, right? Because you could have walked off stage, not heard a thing, right? And then that probably would have put doubt in your head of like, oh man, I don't know if I can ever do this again, right? So how important was it for that one person, even if it was a complete stranger, to just say, "Hey, you got something"? Did that kind of plant a little seed in you, you know?
It did. It like, the guy, I don't remember his name. He was from Tennessee, and he was one of the comedians there. He went on after me, and he was amazing. I wish I can meet, know who he was. And he was, like I said, like when he told me that, Like I was already like, I did it, whatever. Like I made a few people snicker, laugh, whatever.
Mhm.
But when he came up to me and said, "Hey, I feel like you got something," and he's like, "I loved your energy up there, and you made it seem like there was 100 people here." And I guess that was the thing where I was like, I think I have a knack for this. I just,
Yeah.
I don't know what it is yet, but I like because I don't know. You don't know your act right away,
Yeah.
And it was just I was already like, wow, like that was my moment when especially how like from a person who's done it already to tell you that, hey, I think you got something there, man. It felt really great. It felt really
Yeah.
great.
I remember you would go to San Antonio, and one of the times you asked me, like, hey, you want to come with me? Like, you want to go?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And I remember we went, and it was the same thing where, like, dude, that first time that I did it was like horrible. Like, it was just bad, right? Like, even the host was like making fun of me after, and I was kind of like, oh, okay. I just kind of shrugged it off, because we were doing it, I think 2 nights in a row, you and I.
Yeah.
Like, we're doing one night and it was bad, but I just like knew that the second night was coming, so I just shrugged off that first night. I said, okay, I get to do it again. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
let's give it another shot, right? Kind of thing. And I remember I walked off stage after that second time, and there was a same thing, a comedian. I don't remember who it was. I legit don't know who it was, but I know he was a comedian because he introduced himself as like, hey, I'm a professional comedian. He might have even given me a card. I don't remember. But he was like, hey, he goes, is that really your second time? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, you got something, like you're fun. Like, you got something, like, that was really good for your second time. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And same thing that we said right now, where I was like, holy shit, like, this kind of makes me, you know what I mean? Like, this is encouraging, right? It's just crazy. And the reason why I bring this up in my personal experience and what you just shared is because I want people to realize that, like, these words, even to complete strangers, can have such an impact on what they end up doing, maybe for the next few months or for the rest of their life, right? Like,
Definitely, yeah.
You don't realize the weight that your words, we always say, like, oh, words don't matter, but like the weight of those words, right? Like, if that person didn't tell me that, if that person didn't tell you that, we probably would have just been like, okay, I'm gonna go back home and, like, I'm just gonna keep my ass,
like, stay in my room.
I'm just gonna stay in my room. Yeah, just like nobody, nobody talk to me, kind of thing. So I just want people to know that, like, if you're able to give a compliment to somebody, just do it, because you don't know what that person is going through, and your words can definitely have an effect on them. So I want to go back to your story. You were going to San Antonio quite a bit, I would assume, right? Because that's how you're getting your practice.
Because I used to go as much as I could, because I worked for for the school district, so it was always tough for me to go, like, because I had to work every week and then only on the weekend.
Yeah, and the open mics are usually like a random, like, weekday, isn't
Tuesday,
it? Like,
Wednesday.
Yeah.
And I had to literally time my days. Like, I would be like, okay, all right, here's Christmas or here's Thanksgiving vacation, and like, all right, Christmas vacation, like, and each one I was like, even spring break was like me doing like as much as I could, like to go to a mic and stuff, and then, like, that was the first months of me ever meeting other comedians and learning how the vibe was, and learning how, like, like, you have to, like, really earn your way in there, and I learned from a lot of different people, and it was crazy. But that first time that I had to because I had that show that my friend put me on, and it was a local show in Laredo, and I was so excited. And I remember I was like, the first time I ever gotten 100 likes on Facebook. Like, I was like, hi, it was literally just 100. Like, it didn't go 101. It was 100. Yeah. And I was so happy. And it was exciting because it's still one of those things where, like, like, and I lied because, like, I remember, like, he's like, can you do 10 minutes? I was like, of course I can.
No problem.
Like, no problem. Yeah. And I was like, I literally practiced, like, every day. And every time it was like 10:26. I still remember that 10:26. I would always end, and I still remember telling my buddy Mario, who's now he's like my biggest mentor. He was like, I told him, like, I got 10 minutes and 20 seconds, and he's like, really? You timed it out? I was like, oh, a lot. And that show was like crazy because that was the first time that all my friends actually showed up to that. Well, it was my first one, and then we had all the people at the bar, so it was just a lot of people. Yeah, and that was probably one of the best performances. for my first time, I was so excited. I was like, what? Like the bug hit me hard that day. And I was already in, but it was so crazy. Like I was like, that was my first performance. It went well, and I was excited. From then on, my head was already like, that's it. I'm in.
This. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you know, I was like, but I was so dumb, like in the beginning, because I was, as soon as that one moment, I was like, that's it. What do I call? How do I call Netflix? Like, you know, like I was like, I think I need to call Madison Square Garden. Like, you know, like
right. Now,
exactly.
That was your first show locally in front of your friends. Are you? A question I want to ask is: are you were you? I don't know if you still are. Probably not anymore. But were you more nervous to perform in front of your friends or to perform in front of complete strangers?
I would say my friends.
Really?
Yeah, because like I'm especially the ones that I'm really humorous with.
Yeah.
Like you can tell, like I can always tell when they're watching me, and they know what I'm doing, and like, you know, but like to them it's like all right, but to other people it's hilarious. But yeah, you know, it's a lot tougher to have your friends laugh because they already know you. So and sometimes I'll catch my best friends, like I can hear their little laugh in the background, you know, and I'm like, those are the ones I'm like, I was like, I made them laugh, thinking, you know, and they always make fun of me, so it makes me feel good when I'm like, haha, you laughed.
Yeah.
You know, like,
yeah. Well, I think it's also because like in front of your friend or with your friends, there's almost like an expectation, right? Because they know you already, so they're kind of like, all right, we're expecting Steven to be funny. And that might take away the element of like, holy shit, he got me to laugh. Just because like, we're like, okay, we're already expecting it, right? And obviously as a comedian, you go based off of what the audience is giving you, right? So if they're laughing, then you're like, all right, cool. Like I know how this is going, right? You're able to judge how the show's going. And if it's your friends and they already know you, they tend to just kind of be quiet because they're like, well, I don't want to interrupt him perform. It's just kind of a weird thing performing in front of your friends and stuff like that. So after your first local show here in Laredo, when's the next, like, what is the response, not from the audience, but from maybe like clubs, like the venue owner or the promoter? Are they wanting to have you on again, or are they just kind of saying, hey, that was good, but
actually, and I'm not gonna say the place I was at, but the place that I was at, the people liked me there a lot. Like I was always like a frequent person that would go to that place. Okay. So the owners and everyone were so nice to me and stuff. So as soon as I did that first show, like it was a monthly show, so I was every month I got to get put on the show. And you know, like I said, I mean, other times I still remember, like, 'cause my buddy at the time, he's like, oh, this guy's getting on the show every time. He's like, I feel like I went over someone's head, you know, to get on the show. But I lucky enough, I proved that I was good at it. And then the thing was, even though I still did it every month, like I still had my moments where I bombed, and that's when I learned that the bombing and how it had to happen, and like it's inevitable, you know, to anybody comedian, doesn't matter who you are, you know, there's gonna be a night, and that's how I learned the hard way, like thinking that I was like, I'm on this thing every month now, I'm gonna be awesome. And having once or twice where like, oh God, that didn't go well, you know, but at least I learned, you know.
And that's the thing, is that can keep a lot of people away from trying comedy, is that they're like, oh, I don't want to bomb, right? I don't want to go up there. But it's like, it's going to happen, right? It's the same thing. I remember I had a friend who was kind of like training to become an MMA fighter, but there was something kind of holding him back. And I remember it was like, we talked and we were like, dude, are you afraid of getting your ass kicked? Because I'm going to tell you, like, it's going to happen. Like, it's just, it comes with it, right? It's the same thing with comedy. We're like, are you afraid of bombing? Because it's gonna happen. Yeah. Don't think you're perfect or whatever, this and that. And you know, it's just one of those things where it's similar to like how we say, like, hey, you gotta fail, right? Because when you bomb, you're kind of like, oh shit, that was terrible. Okay, why was that terrible? You know, like you kind of get to process, okay, what was it, right? Because it's all about how you respond to those situations, right? To those like failure or bombing or whatever you want to call it. It's how you respond and recover from that, right? So you could just easily say, hey, you know what? I bombed. That was terrible. They hate me. Again, I'm not doing this again. Like, I'm just not going to, right?
I've encountered that a lot.
Yeah. So, and we just have our moments, but then you also remember those moments where you're like, hey, I remember getting a whole room to laugh, or I remember getting, so like, you kind of just have to realize that it comes with the territory, right? It just, it happens. So We're going to continue our conversation with Steven when we come back. We're going to go to commercial break. Before we do, make sure you follow us on social media. It is Eric Alvarez Presents Your Show on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. And on TikTok, we're Your Show Podcast. So make sure you look us up. And also on Spotify, you can click the follow button and you can also leave a review and let us know how we're doing. So we'll be back in just a few. Welcome back to Your Show. Eric Alvarez here with Steven Sosa. Steven, we've been talking a lot about kind of your first time and how we mentioned that like there wasn't really much going on in Laredo and you were having to take as many trips as you could to San Antonio to hit up open mics and to kind of, you know, hit up any comedy venues out there. Yeah. And then you got your first local show here in Laredo. And you started doing that about once a month, maybe here in Laredo. I want to know what was the kind of idea or the process of expanding comedy here in Laredo? Were you content with doing this one show a month at this certain venue, or were you already looking at like, hey, there's other we can make this a thing?
I think after a couple of months doing it is when I started meeting other comedians and meeting other people. Like I said, Mario would always let me. I started doing shows in the Valley with him at the Cine El Rey, and that kind of cut my teeth on like, you know, figuring out how to run a show and how to you know, be a great host and stuff. And when I started noticing that is when I met Ponchi Herrera. Shout out to Ponchi. He's originally from here, but he does comedy in El Paso. And he was the one he's like, you got to do an open mic, man. You got to start an open mic. And I didn't get it just from him. I got it from Corpus. Also, my buddy Javi Luna. Another shout out to him, another great comic. He was the one. He's like, you got to do an open mic, and I was scared because I was like, I the hardest part is taking responsibility and to do something like that. And I was scared, that thinking if I wouldn't have done it right. But that was the first time, and it was the funny part was just saying that it was going to be an open mic, but I had nobody to know about who's going to do it, who's going to sign up, you know. And I remember I was writing a lot with actually your brother a lot, and me and George would always write. And I still remember him, and I think it was another friend of ours. But he just like I said, like once I announced that we had the open mic, and I got him to do it, and Ponchi was like, "I'll do it with y'all." So it was kind of nice because like basically another mentor helping me out, and it felt more like I had somebody helping me, like a coach there with me. And that first night was great, but like I said, it was the first night that I actually had to wait for people to show up to sign up for comedy, and that was another one of just like waiting of like, oh, is someone gonna show up? And I still remember one of my buddies came in, he signed up, a random guy signed up, and that was our first night. And I remember I still see the picture like you know, from back in the day when it comes on Facebook, and you're like, wow. But that was the first open mic I ever did, and from then on, I kept doing it every time. And from then it grew to another place that we did it at, and that's when people just started showing up, you know.
Yeah.
And out of the woodwork is where you start meeting people that, oh, I want to try comedy, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's because that's the thing. It's like how we said it was like difficult for you to kind of find places at first. You had to go to San Antonio. There were probably other people in that situation where like, hey, I want to try it, but like, where do I go in Laredo to do it, right? And the thing is, like, doing an open mic. Were you having to convince any like venue or anything like that about the idea of an open mic? Because I know like bars love to do like karaoke and stuff like that, right? Yeah. So was it different to say, hey, can we have this one night be open mic?
Yeah. So to be honest, though, the first place I looked at, I already did shows there in my rock shows. So asking him like I was like, when I asked him about comedy, he was like, oh yeah, definitely, let's do it. And I was like, okay, like. And then the next one, same place. I just asked them, and they said sure. And it was because again, like you said, it was something new.
Yeah.
And I was like, they just thought, yeah, why not? You know. And it grew from there. And like, you know, like I said, like from then on, like it just started becoming like a chain reaction. You know, just like I did those mics, and then another mic would pop up somewhere, or you know, or an open mic would start up somewhere, and it was like what, you know. And I could say like from my open mics, like a lot of people just started coming out of the woodwork, like and meeting people, there's a few now that they're all great comics now doing great stuff. And their first stop was my place, and it was so cool to see them. Like I said, like from then on, I started meeting comics and becoming friends with a lot of new ones and a lot of new comics. And that's when I started just, me and George were always like, man, we just thought, hey, like Laredo Funny, man, like, hashtag Laredo Funny.
Yeah.
And that became like a thing between us. We just kept saying it. We even tagged it places, and it just, I don't know, it just started. And from then on, we met other comics that started up, and they wanted to join our group. And it wasn't really a group, it was just a thing, like, but then it turned into a group,
So you didn't start it thinking like, hey, we're gonna start a comedy group, because comedy groups exist. It's not like Laredo Funny is the only, like, all throughout the country there's comedy troops and comedy groups, stuff like that. So did you guys didn't start it thinking like, hey, we're gonna start a comedy group? It just kind of like,
no, it was more of just like of something of like, for Laredo to know that there's comedy. That's where we had Laredo Funny, because it was just, it was like a place that you knew where the comedy was. And like, that's how it started off. And then it just, like I said, that we met other comics and they hung out with us.
Yeah.
And we would all hang out together, and we would write, and we would record ourselves and like help each other with jokes. That's when it started becoming a group. And
gotcha.
Yeah, because when we were always together, and we were always like, we would do the mics, and then we would go hang out after, and we would just write. We would just help each other write, and like I said, people just started coming in, and we would just be like, hey, you're in, like, and it was actually just like, I remember like once you did it, we didn't have like a set of
criteria.
Yeah, like a criteria or like you have to sign here. No, it was just like, you know what, dude, you're in.
Yeah.
We were just so happy to have people doing it,
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's a kind of thing where you went through it you were going through it by yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Were you kind of like, hey, now that we're a group, like, we can go through this together, like we can help each other out, not just with like writing jokes, but also like if there's kind of like a nerve, like if you're nervous about going, hey, we can help you out, like we can, we're all here for each other, right? Because you've bombed and gone through that experience by yourself, but now to have a group of people that, hey, if this happens to one of us, like, you're okay, like you have somebody in your corner, right? Was that kind of the relationship that you all had with each other?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we were always competitive with all the guys that, we were like, if you bombed and if everyone killed it and you're the only one that didn't bomb, be ready for the ridicule on the way home,
Yeah.
Like, but it happened. But it people like I said, like how you said it before, that people need to go through these things to get stronger. And, it took a lot for because if you go through those moments where everyone killed it and you're the only one that sucked that night and everyone's making fun of you, to get through that and to get better is the biggest part of comedy. Like, because a lot of people bomb once and they're like, that's it, not doing this ever again.
Yeah.
And again, that's the leap you have to make,
Yeah. And the thing is, like, being competitive with one another, there's also a motivating factor there, right? It's not just like, hey, fuck you or whatever. No, it's like, damn, like Steven was really funny, and now I want to be better. Like, I want to do better than that.
Yes.
And it's nothing against you, but then the thing about competition in almost any aspect is that competition just makes everybody better, right? Because there's a kind of passion. You're not just there like, oh, okay, yeah, we're friends, like it's totally fine that you were funnier than me. It's like, no, like, damn you, like I'm gonna be better than that. Yeah, I'm gonna be better than that and stuff like that. Now, when you're first doing the open mics, is it like do you guys start branding it, or not when you first start doing open mics, but when you're hosting these open mics, are you branding it as like a Laredo Funny thing? Like, does the branding start coming into it?
Yeah, in the beginning, that's because I was like, once we had the thing, like I said, like once we had our group start, everyone brought something to the table, and like that's the thing I liked about the group. And we already had our Facebook came up, and then I was really, I started making flyers. That was my first time making flyers. I still look at my old flyers and go, wow, did I suck? But I was, like I would always be like, Laredo Funny presents, and that was the coolest. Like, because I was the first time I actually did started branding us as as the group that you're coming. If you're coming to see this, you're coming to see comedy. And that was the first time, like when we first started, like as a group, that we did flyers and like events and stuff like that, and and like I said, like since from the beginning, it was like that's like the beauty part of the open mics was how it developed our actual showcases.
Yeah,
that came up later, and and I still remember it back in the day talking about it, like oh man, imagine in the future when we get like that we're gonna know comics and we're gonna be doing shows and like going out of town. We were talking like back in the day, like we're gonna be famous. It's like those old school talks. We should make a band.
Yeah.
And it's crazy where we are now, but yeah, back then it was just that was the first start. Was just putting our name out there and putting our showcase, our little open mics and showcases with our brand, and it was a good response, people. And like I said, the good thing is that we were funny. So
for sure.
That was a good part.
That's probably a key component to that.
Yeah, because of the name. Yeah. So yeah, like that was the beginning point. And like I remember from the open mics is when we started noticing, we're like, man, I think we deserve money for this. That's when slowly and surely a lot of those came up. But yeah, like the next step was us making showcases and bringing down comics and actually showcasing people from out of town, and that was crazy because that put us to a whole new world. From just being in our little bubble of Laredo to noticing the biggest bubble, which is Texas.
Yeah, for sure. And now when you guys start tossing around the idea of doing showcases, what kind of leads to that? Are you seeing like a growth in attendance for the open mics? Are you seeing more audience, more of an audience at the open mics? Are you getting responses like online? Like what leads to that kind of like, hey, we should do a showcase, which is different obviously from an open mic?
Yeah, I think when we did the open mics for a few months is when we started was like we should really bring some people down, and like we should really like try it. And that was the thing. It was just like because in the beginning we were all new to the scene, so it was just to bring the people down that we had only a few people that we knew, and I wish I could remember because I still remember some of the first few. And we would bring people that were just, other comics like us, just trying to make it. And that was our first time meeting, them. And that was the thing that we started learning, is that how you needed to learn that you needed to meet other people. You needed to start. That was when I first realized about networking, and how important networking became to all of us, And that was that I think from when we started doing showcases was when we started finding more, like more people that were like us that were doing it too. And the Valley was a big part of it, and San Antonio, Corpus is now a lot like same thing, like all of them, that they just grow so great, but back in the day that was our first one, was the Valley. Our Valley was the one we because we would all like, after I went to Cine El Rey, a lot of everybody else started getting to go to see Cine El Rey, and everybody was getting different shows. And we were showing our and like I said, Laredo, when we first started, we were very like, we had a fire under our ass, man. And like a lot of us became good because I think we practiced really much a lot. And I think the group effort really helped, and so that's what got us to like, from the open mics to showcases. And like I said, that from then it was just finding other venues. And because after a while you're like, okay, this part doesn't work. We need to find somewhere else, And I remember from then, that's when we found a few other places that we did our actual showcases, and that's when we met, the big headliners, and and that was a big step in our evolution of our group.
Yeah. And the thing is, you mentioned, like how maybe it was important to have like kind of a group, doing this and going through this, and I bring that up because I think we've mentioned before on this podcast how. And it's a really an important thing that we often don't think about, but you need to surround yourself with like-minded people, right? In order to achieve whatever it is that you're, if you were doing it by yourself, it's just easier to get discouraged or to just kind of give up or say, hey, it's not really going anywhere. But when you surround yourself with like-minded people, or when you put yourself in a group, right? Like I was very big into like video editing and kind of like communications and that kind of stuff. But there wasn't really anybody here in Laredo like that I was surrounding myself with that did that at the time. So I went off like, hey, I'm going to go to Orlando. I'm going to go to school and surround myself with people who are doing that. And it just, it inspires so much creativity. It inspires like a work ethic. It just boosts you more. And so I always tell people, like, if you're able to surround yourself with like-minded, surround yourself with people who know what you're going through, who are going through it with you or have gone through it, and you'll find yourself like wanting to be better because of it, right? And again, we mentioned that before already with Laredo Funny, is that you guys are competitive, you guys are traveling together, and it's just kind of like, hey, we're going, you know, nobody wants to feel alone, right? Like any aspect, nobody, that's like one of the worst feelings, is to feel like you're alone. And so to have a group, not just in comedy, but like if you have close friends, if you have family that are close, like anything like that, if you're able to kind of bring this kind of group kind of chemistry together, you guys just kind of help all each other, you know, kind of help each other out and stuff like that. So you guys, Laredo Funny, when do you start to notice it becoming kind of a brand, a recognizable brand, to where people are like, hey, you're from Laredo Funny, aren't you? Or is this person with Laredo Funny? Okay, they're going to be good. When do you start to notice that?
To be honest, I think after a couple years in, because we were already 6 years as a Laredo Funny as the group. And I think after a couple years, like once we got to our 4th year, going on the 5th, that's when we started noticing that when people were like, oh, Laredo Funny's throwing the show, oh, that's gonna be great, or oh, he's in Laredo Funny, he's a good comic. And like it happened around then. But like the good thing was that besides my group, like I think the good thing about my group is how it inspired other groups in other places to start, because you know we sprouted into to different ones, and it was great because it was seeing the, like I said, like evolution and the whole thing of other people trying it out. So I think when the 4th one is when people really started to recognize us. But then I was really happy after the 5th year is when more places started doing comedy and people started recognizing Laredo as whole as a comedy scene. You know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just one of those things where, like, I would assume because it is your hometown, is it fair to say that you're just happy to see more of what you love to do popping up, right? Even if you're not directly involved with it, it's just like, hey, that's great. Like, it makes us all better if more people are doing it, right? Yeah.
Like I shout out to a lot of people that are in Laredo right now that are doing, you know, they're great. Like the Mic Drop, and of course Rooftop with Aaron Suarez, you know, Laugh Laredo. Like they are other side of comedy groups that have been doing it here in Laredo, and they've been doing a great job and just, you know, bringing laughter and that's the thing I'm proud of, is that I'm glad that they all, you know, I'm glad I got to bring that to everybody to find out what good they were and how that they were good at comedy. And I feel proud of that, you know, that I got to do something like that. And
well, I mean,
it's nice.
Yeah, because sometimes it just takes one kind of person it just kind of takes one person to say, to kind of do it, and for others to be like, hey, you know what, like, like, I think we can all do this. I think we can all, you know, and it's kind of like, great, you know, you don't want to hold anybody down. You don't want to say, no, you can't do that, because I know it's like, yeah, dude, come on, like, come on up, right? And especially because like open mics at the beginning, I'm pretty sure were difficult to get people, and now it's just like, yeah, dude, come on, like, join us, like, you know, why not? Kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I was like, and then like I said, in the beginning, it was always like everyone doing it, and then finally other people doing it too, and people finding their favorite spots to go to, and being happy with the people that they're working with. It was so great to see. Oh, excuse me. And I was just so good to see everyone, you know, finding their love for it. You know, that's the one thing I was happy about. And it's a good thing that everyone kept, you know, with that's the one thing about it, is that after all the years that we've been doing it as a group and everybody else, the hardest thing is to keep up with it, you know. And I've seen people come and go, and that's when you start to notice the real passionate people and the people that really want to do it, you know.
Yeah, so for sure. Yeah, it's good to see just kind of people involved like that. So we're going to continue this conversation with Steven Sosa. We're going to go to commercial break. Before we do, Steven, where can people find you on social media?
If you find me, you can find me on Steven Sosa Comedy on Instagram and Facebook. I do have a Snapchat, but I don't really use it a lot. But I forgot what the name was for that, but yeah, I also have of course my comedy group Laredo Funny. We're also on Instagram and Facebook. You can catch anything from any other comics that are on there, and anything that's going on in Laredo in the 956. That's where it's at, man. If you want to check us out.
Yeah, for sure. So make sure you follow him on social media and follow us on social media. This is Eric Alvarez Presents Your Show. We'll be back in just a few. Welcome back to Your Show. Eric here with Steven. Steven, we've been talking a lot about kind of when you first got started. We started talking about Laredo Funny and stuff like that. Kind of how it was important to kind of have a group with you as opposed to just going, by yourself. I'm not saying it would have been impossible to do it by yourself, but it just helps to have a group going through these things with you and not only that, like at first it's kind of just like a support thing, and then it becomes a brand, and then it becomes a name, and now you guys are putting on showcases and it's like a recognizable, Laredo Funny, they're putting on a show, let's go. What I want to ask you, and we had Sarah Garza on a couple weeks ago, and I asked her this. I want to ask you, how much of a change did you see? Because when you're in audiences, because at first you have to kind of convince people that like, hey, this is a comedy show, and now I assume people show up knowing it's a comedy show. Is that is that correct?
Oh, definitely, man, definitely.
Yeah.
I remember when the first thing we started doing that we learned was how to train an audience. And if no one's ever heard that phrase, we learned it on the job. Yeah. And it was crazy to see how, like that's the hardest thing, was like to have people know, hey, it's a comedy show, don't talk, don't do this, and I think that was the hardest thing, was learning how to get people to know that it's a comedy show. Because Laredo was like didn't know.
Yeah, no, they wanted to go for drinks and music and be loud and stuff like that, and so when you have somebody up there talking, it's just kind of like, what is this? What's going on? I came here to, whatever. And now people just know, like, hey, I'm going to go to this venue because there's a comedy show going on tonight, know? And that must be satisfying to know to see that change, right? Because you were there at the beginning when it was like, no,
we had to work harder on that one.
Yeah. So it must be satisfying to see that. So you guys, are not only doing comedy in Laredo, you also have done comedy kind of around different cities and stuff like that. What has that experience been like as far as traveling? Is it what you expected? Did you have any expectations for traveling out of town, or did that kind of first experiences of having to go to San Antonio kind of prep you for that?
I mean, at one point, the San Antonio stuff, it was fun, but it didn't prep me for when I had to actually go on the road, because you start realizing different things on the road, and me even getting to just travel with friends and stuff like that, it still was the only thing, was also like figuring out where we're gonna stay and how we're gonna get food, or and are we even getting paid, those are the things you worry about when you first started traveling. But I mean, after a while, like it just like as long as you put in the work, like the trips come in, but it's one of those things where like you learn on the job, and it was always crazy, because we didn't know if the night was gonna go good or not, but and that's the price you had to pay, to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing for people to recognize, especially if you're wanting to get into comedy, is that there's different audiences, right? Like even like different cities, there's a different audience, or different venues, there's a different audience. How important is it to recognize that, because there's a TV show that I love watching on HBO, and I know you've seen it, called Crashing, about Pete Holmes. And one of the things is like they perform at like a college kind of event, and they're telling them like, hey, look, you don't do this material here for these college students. And one of the comedians on there is like, no, that's my thing. Like, I'm going to go do what I do. And it's kind of like, like you just need to be aware of like what's going on. Was that something you guys realized early on, is that there's different audiences, or did you have to go to that tough kind of, oh shit, this doesn't work here?
No, I think we had to go through it, because there was times that when we did shows where we didn't know if people were gonna and then the thing is also, they would tell us, hey, don't do these jokes, and I never really had few people that would like push the envelope, but like I still remember, even if because you don't even know if your stuff's offensive until you try it.
Yeah.
You know, and I still remember doing some jokes, and I've had those moments where I was like, oh, they're not digging this at all. And that's what we call like digging a hole, because that's the way that it feels like. It just feels you're going deeper and deeper, and until you lose breath, and then you're finally like, okay, well, thank you. Like, and I was like, you know, like, I think you learned that a lot. And like, I haven't gotten to that point where I've gotten to like, because I can only imagine how it is when you get to TV and all that stuff. And I mean, you know, that's a thing where you got to be prepared for. I think a lot of times that's why like learning how to do clean material and learning how to change your dirty material to clean material is a part of learning to get to that next step, which would be, you know, television and all that stuff. But those are the ones that, and like I said, like if you're doing a college nowadays, it's just a prerequisite to just know, don't make fun of this, don't make fun of that. You know, if you want to do it and never go back working there, then go ahead, be one of those rebels that want to do it. But it's like, when it comes to business and when it comes to like, you know, like you want to come back here because you made good money, I was like, well, you got to play ball. And like it says, you don't have to change your material, just figure out how to make it not the way you like, you know, like, and that's a thing. That's another part of comedy where it just is the homework. You know, you don't notice that you're doing homework until it is, where you have to literally stop what you want to do at your house and go, hey, you got to work on this material. You know, you're about to talk about doing a sex tape. You got to make sure that it's clean, you know, and that's just what it is. It's pretty much homework. And that's where a lot of comics were like, that's when you see that side of the people that are like, oh God, work, you know? And nobody wants that, you know?
I just want to go up and tell like, no, this is work. Like, this is something, it's again, we've said this before on the podcast, is like, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And it's the same thing with comedy, right? If you're doing the bare minimum, like, no, I'm just going to go to an open mic, I'm just going to say this thing, then it's like, you're not going to like advance the way you could if you actually say, okay, I'm doing open mics, I'm working on my material at home, whatever it is. And that's important. And that never goes away for a comedian, right? It's just always one of the things where you just need to constantly keep working and not just on your material, but then working on, like you said, network. You got to network, you got to meet people. You can't just expect people to just walk up to you and be like, oh, okay, I want to book. No, you have to go. It's a lot. I always said, like, comedy is a lot of things, but it's like five. I always say the top 5 things about comedy is always respect, friendship, dedication, heart, and, you know, just straight up passion. Yeah, I remember, like, I was doing the music stuff for a few years, and I remember we would always see those bands that, like, they would play, and then they would just, like, stand in the back of the room, like, not talking to anybody. And it's like, early on, we were one of those, and then we started realizing we can't do that. If we want to get booked, if we want to get, you know, more opportunities, we have to go talk to the other bands. We have to talk to the promoter. We don't just show up, play, and then or even leave. There would always be those bands that would, like, play their set and then take off. And it's like, dude, like, what are you doing? Like, you have to, there's a whole nother aspect to that. And I would assume it's the same thing in comedy, right? You don't just do your set and be like, all right, bye, unless you're doing another set somewhere else. But like, if you're just going to go home, it's like, dude, stay there, like, talk to other people, not just other comedians or not just the promoter, but even the audience. You want to get, 100%. Yeah. You know, you want to relate to them kind of thing and let them know, like, yes, they went there to see a comedian, but they also want to know that you're human, right? That you're just a guy that they can talk to. Every show I've done, and from now on, like, even if it's an open mic, after the show's done, anybody that watched us, I go up to every one of them and say, thank you so much for being here. And I appreciate you sticking with us and watching us. And it does, and like, to them, you think you're just being like, oh, you're just saying thanks. To them, they're seeing you going, oh my God, they came up to me and thanked me for being here. They remember that and go, I'm going to come back to see these people because they're so nice. And that's just part of it, you know, like, you have to embrace everybody because they're the reason you're there. And even with promoters, like, they see that and they see you being great to their customers, you know, and people are wanting to come back for that. Like, that's networking at its fullest, you know? Yeah, for sure. So you've been doing comedy now. You mentioned maybe around 2014 is when you got started. 7 years. So obviously anytime somebody gets started with something, there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of this and that, it's just it's new, it's fresh, right? So after doing it 7 years, how are you feeling? Are you still motivated? Are you still passionate? Are you still like, has anything changed as far as like your passion for it?
I think the more older I've gotten in comedy, I think my passion's growing harder. Like it's grown a lot more.
Yeah.
I think it's going to the point where I always have to calm down and talk, like, because if I talk comedy, I'll talk so much of it that I'll literally have to be like, am I talking too much?
Yeah.
I can stop, because I know myself. And I think it's gotten to that point where I love it so much where, I know what it takes to do it now. And, I haven't took my foot off the pedal since then. I think that's where you really need to know, yourself, especially in this line of work, is that do you really want to do it?
Yeah. Well, because it's easy to get complacent and just be like, I'm fine. I'm fine doing my one show a month or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Especially after doing it for 7 years or so. But you need to constantly be wanting to grow and learn and get better and stuff like that. And you're doing out of town shows. You have some coming up, right? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What are the shows that you have coming up? If you want to go ahead and kind of just mention them here in Laredo or just around in surrounding cities.
I do have 2 shows coming in Laredo. I have one at the beginning of the month on May 6th. It's going to be at the Wonder Lounge. We're going to be with Kua Genti. He's all the way from Houston. An amazing comic. He's your favorite African. And you can check all his stuff on Spotify. But I'm going to be on that show. I will be featuring with a lot of great comics from Laredo. Sarah Garza, who you had, she'll be hosting that day. Some great comics from Corpus. Also, I will be in El Paso at the comic strip with my buddy Mario. Shout out again, Mario, superstar. I'm going to be there a couple days. And then I do have a show here in Laredo, back in Laredo at Cultura. And we'll be at Cultura Beer Garden doing our keg stand show. And that one we're bringing down Israel, one bad comic, amazing comic from San Antonio. And also Irma Ruiz, man, she's going to be coming down too. And she's amazing. And those are just great good friends of ours that are going to be here. And that's the month of May. It's going to be fun, man. And then of course in June, we got the big LGBTQ. I think I said that right. That's going to be the big showcase. We have that coming down, and that's going to be an amazing. The whole month of June is going to be amazing. And if you just follow us on Laredo Funny, you're going to see all those great shows, man. Yeah.
So make sure you follow Laredo Funny on social media. Make sure you follow Steven Sosa on social media. Steven Sosa Comedy, correct?
Yes.
To keep an eye out for those shows, because there's a lot coming up and there's a lot of opportunities. And a lot of times, especially here in Laredo, we often find people or hear people say stuff like, oh, there's nothing to do, or oh, like I'm bored. And it's like, dude, there's a lot going on. And comedy is one of those things that we can rely on, that we can say, hey, you know what? This is happening. I know it's happening. I'm going to go, right? Like, it's just one of those things now where before we didn't know where to go for comedy. And now it's like, dude, there's comedy. Like, go to
we're here,
right? Man. Yeah. Right. So I'm excited for the summer, what you have coming. I remember I saw the post, so you had several dates, and I was like, hey, dude, you have this coming up. Like, let's go. Like, that's because we talked about having you on the podcast, and it's kind of like, we'll see what's going to happen. And then it was like, all right, I see these comedy shows coming up. Let's come up. Are you excited for shows? Do you still get nervous before shows, or are you kind of just like, that never goes away?
No, I still, the worst part of the nerves is like, are they going to laugh? Are they going to like this? I know it's been working, but is it going to work here today? Like, I still have those moments. My heart beats. I need to have a few beers before I go up or something, because the nerves are killing me.
Yeah.
But a lot of times the nerves, it's more excitement. It's more anticipation, and I'm anxious. I'm always anxious to just get up there already. Because when I'm up there, everything goes away.
Yeah.
From anything, from anxiety to anything, depression, it's all gone. Those few minutes I'm up there, and it's just that's why I do it, because everything goes away in that moment, and people's laughter is my new drug, and I love it.
Yeah, for sure. I've played music on stage in front of people for years, and I've done a few open mics over the years. And every time I've noticed that before I go on stage with music or doing those open mics a few times, like I'm like in like a zone. I'm like, don't, I can't talk to people. I'm just like, I can't eat anything. I can't drink. I just want to go up there. And then once you go up on stage, like you said, it's totally fine. I'm good. And then I get off stage. Now I can talk. Now, okay, now we can eat. And now we can. It's just one of those things. It's just like, that's like my process. Like, I didn't make that my process, but that's just like how it worked. Like, it was just like, no, I can't talk to anybody. Different. Like, I wasn't rude. Like, don't talk to me. I was just kind of like off in the corner by myself somewhere, just kind of like, oh man, okay, here we go. Do you have a process before you go on stage? Is there something you need to do? I know you mentioned you maybe have a couple drinks, stuff like that, but is there something that you go through to kind of get in the zone?
A lot of times now, like it's when I try to remember my material. So I'm always usually like, I talk to myself and always like, like just being like, okay, this is how I'm going to do it. This is the open. And then, because a lot of times now when you start getting like older in comedy and doing more shows at big venues, is when you really need to learn like how to read the audience and how to see, okay, there's a lot of old people here, let's try to figure out they're gonna like this, and you have to start figuring out more and more, and besides also remembering your material. And that's another thing I was learning how to do my material without looking at it, and I think that's the biggest thing is like before a show I'm always just remembering my material, and I always have my material like a one word. So I already know, like, okay, I'm going to do this one, then this one, then that one. Got it, And then, like, I just keep repeating that, this one, this one. And as soon as they call my name, that's when I'm like, all right, let's do it,
Yeah. And we talked about this with Sarah, where, like, you can have your kind of set prepared, but you also have to leave some room to, like, kind of work with the crowd and improvise. Is that correct? Is that something you do? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, because even though you're doing material, you also have to remember that you don't know if they're gonna say something towards your material. Like if I say, like if I'm doing a joke and I'm like, well, video games are always, and then somebody's like, I love video games. You always have to be prepared for anything. Like I have a rule that I do where when I prepare a joke, it's part of the rule of 3, where you have to make sure if the joke's gonna kill, and if the joke's gonna bomb, and if the joke's gonna get heckled. If you know those 3 for the same joke and prepare yourself for that, then it's a lot easier. That's just a lot more work though. But to really find out that if you say, well, I like video games, and nobody says anything, and you just go, okay, I guess it's just me. And then like where somebody goes, I love video games. Like, okay, buddy, it sounds like your version. You figure out little things so you already know you're prepared for anything. Yeah. And that's a lot of like, because especially when you're working with a crowd that you don't know what's going to happen, and that's the part that you just got to be prepared for.
I also think that like comedy audiences are smart. Like they know, like when you're kind of just going off the list, or when you're like, hey, wow, that wasn't supposed to happen. Like he actually, address, like they kind of appreciate that a little bit more. They kind of appreciate a comedian a little bit more when they can address the situation. They can address the situation. Nothing phases that, or like they're not just like, okay, I'm gonna ignore that and just continue. Like no, it's like, and the thing is, any audience, whether it's music or comedy, they love the interaction, right? They love that you acknowledge that they're there, right? Just, hey, I see you, right? Whatever, blah blah. They just love that. They feed off a comedian or a performer being able to interact with them. And that's one of the things. Now, you mentioned hecklers. How often does that happen, or how often has that happened?
Hecklers, I mean, it depends. A lot of times, like, depends if people are drinking and when you start a show, because a lot of times you start shows, people are already drinking. That's another thing you got to keep an eye on, is like, oh, like this whole crowd's already, like, we should start already because these guys are already on 2 buckets, like. And a lot of times that alcohol is always the one thing that makes everyone just loosen up and being like, I want and you're like, oh, not right now, not yet, buddy. Like, and even then, you can even tell a heckler before even, like, I've had times when I was in San Antonio and a guy would walk in like a leather jacket, and just like as soon as he walked in, he's like, I'm gonna find a seat somewhere around, and while the show's going on, like, and you already know, you're like, oh, I'm gonna have to figure this one out.
Yeah, I was about to ask if you're able to kind of spot like, okay, you got to keep an eye on this one. He's a potential, or she, or whatever it is. Like they're a potential.
That comes in after a couple of years, but like, because in the beginning you don't notice it, and you're just jumped into the lion's den. You don't even know. And after a couple of years, you start to notice like, oh, they're going to be a problem. But it's up to you to figure out how, because a lot of times you can be a few things when the heckler happens. You can be mean, or you can try to make them part of like funny with it, or you can just ignore them. And like there's like, but a lot of times ignoring doesn't help, because then they'll just do it more.
Louder.
I always say, you just have to, I always say, for me, I always try to figure out how to get them to laugh with me.
Yeah. And
try to get them to like feel like, oh, okay, all right, I kind of get it. I'll stop, Yeah. And that one's a good one to try to do. Like if you're just mean, sometimes it works, because then they'll just get up and leave, and you're just like, good, he's out of here.
Yeah.
But then they have the other opposite, where they're just gonna go back at you, back and forth, and the back and forth is the worst thing.
It just takes over, and it's like,
because that's just taking over your time,
Yeah, for sure. I've enjoyed this conversation. We're about to wrap it up. Before we do we have do you have any kind of advice or kind of tips for maybe somebody who wants to try comedy and has not gone up on stage? Is there any kind of words you'd like to share with them?
I say if you never tried it before and you want to try it out, I always say try it. I always say just try it out. But the one thing is I always say watch it first. If you're gonna do comedy for the first time, come to an open mic, and just watch us go up and watch us perform, and watch how we learned different little things that we do, like the light and all the stuff like that. And I always say, come watch it and see other things. And from then, I think it's up to you. If you want to try it out, go ahead and do it, because that helps a lot. Because when you see it more, you start get that comfortableness with watching it. And from then on, when you first try it, you're like, you already have a better idea. Because I think just going up randomly, like that's always like it's a crapshoot. Like either you're gonna do it, like it's like karaoke. Like you never done it once, but then you go up and But I always say, if you're gonna want to try comedy, I'd say watch it first. Get educated on it. Like watch documentaries, watch things about it. Learn more about it. And I think that will help you transition into actually doing it.
Yeah, for sure. So, Steven, again, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me at Steven Sosa Comedy on Instagram and Facebook. And if you want to check out my group, we're called Laredo Funny. We're on also Instagram and Facebook. You can message us there if you want to know about any open mics or any showcases coming up. Like I said, tickets are on sale now for that May 6th one. So if you guys want, get on that. And just let us know. We're very easygoing people, and we love people that want to just do comedy and just even be a part of it. So come check us out.
Yeah, for sure. And now you make sure you follow us as well. Eric Represents Your Show. We'll be tagging Laredo Funny and Steven Sosa on there when we make our posts about them. We'll be sharing a couple of clips and stuff like that. So again, follow us. And on Spotify, you can leave reviews now. So go ahead and leave us a review. Let us know what you think. And we'll be back again with another guest very soon. We're lining them up, and we have a couple different people. I know I talked to my brother, George, about being on here. He's also a comedian with Laredo Funny. We mentioned him a couple times on this podcast, on this episode. So we'll make sure to have him on soon. And again, everybody else, thank you so much for listening. Steven, thank you so much for being a part of your show. Me, man. Yeah, of course, man. This is always available anytime you want. Just go ahead and hit me up, and we'll get you on here. We'll get anybody you want on here, stuff like that. So everyone else, thank you so much for listening. And we'll be back next week with another guest.